This is Johnny Blue Star. Welcome to Threshold, a global media event.
Vegas All-Net Radio, the final frontier of free speech.
Views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect those of Vegas All-Net Radio, its affiliates, or its parent company.
This is Johnny Blue Star. Welcome to Threshold, a global media event. Is the universe just a random dance of atoms, or is it a manifestation of a supremely intelligent architect? Can its purpose, or our purpose here on Earth, be adequately assessed? Can we commune with it, know its intentions, cooperate with its direction? Here, we define threshold as a gateway state of awareness, allowing mankind to cross into a place of real cognition. Threshold allows us to approach questions of higher reality through the door of experience, rather than mere belief. Welcome to Threshold, where we tear away the veil from commercial media, bringing our audience and participants into another realm of reality and enhanced communication. Today, I am overwhelmingly excited to have connected with Kenneth Eade, an attorney, author, and environmental activist. As some of you out there may know, my father was an attorney who continually assisted helping many people pro bono, especially to protect their civil liberties. I grew up with a man who really became my hero. I witnessed one of his best moments in a police brutality trial in Suffolk County when he defended the victim of an organized campaign by several police to intimidate African Americans. They would stop them, for minor violations, and then, in this case, they brutalized this poor man and his wife. They maced him. They beat him up. He had to go to the hospital. And later on, as I saw in the court, they actually doctored the records that happened in the hospital somehow. Anyway, in the year that he retired, he defended victims of police brutality in 4 separate trials. I think my father, if he were alive today, would appreciate the work of my guest, who in his legal battles and books fights against tyranny and injustice every day. Ken, welcome to Threshold.
Thank you, Johnny. Thanks for having me on the program. Sounds like your father was a great man.
He was, he was not a famous lawyer, but he fought in the ranks with many, many other people during the civil rights movement. He went down to the Mississippi Summer Law Project, which was handled by SNCC to assist civil rights workers during the time that, those various workers, those 4 workers were murdered. So he was somebody who fought there.
Sorry. I couldn't help but think during your introduction about the Sandra Bland matter and the Michael Brown matter and how maybe your father could have made a difference in the fight against police brutality today.
Yeah, it's something. Anyway, in almost all of our programs, Ken, we're concerned about an individual's growth in consciousness and awareness. Obviously, we will soon find out in detail your social conscience has been awakened some time ago, as evidenced by your career as an attorney, environmentalist, and novelist, focusing on social and political problems. Did your life as a child provide any impetus in this direction?
I guess you could say that it did, because I got a little different perspective during my childhood, because I was brought up not only in the United States, but when I was about 8 years old, my family moved to Athens, Greece, and we lived there for about 3 years. So when I came back, I had a little different perspective on things because I'd seen the world from a different point of view. And I was kind of treated like a stranger in my own country, like a foreign person, which was weird for me, but I was different than everybody because of my experience. And that kind of led me to inspire me to write Killer.com, which is my latest novel that exposes the issue of cyberbullying.
Well, tell us a little bit how your general experience as a practicing attorney gave you a deeper insight into some of the injustices prevailing right now, of which there are many, I may add.
Oh yeah, there's plenty, and as an attorney, you see a lot of things that people don't see in the media. You see a lot of things that people don't see in their everyday lives, because people are coming to you with real problems. You learn about civil rights in law school, and you learn what they are and how to recognize violation of civil rights, but you don't actually see it happening until you get out there in the real world. I remember the first year I was practicing, and a guy came in to me for a basic drunk driving case, and he showed me the pictures that he had taken of his he showed me his wrists and his ankles, and during the time he was held in police custody, they had hogtied him with handcuffs. So it showed me firsthand, how police can get out of hand and violate a person's rights and have no respect for a person who's been accused of a crime, and you're supposed to be, presumed innocent, right?
Yeah, certainly. Although that's becoming rarer, I believe. Ken?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, it opened my eyes to a lot of things.
By now, you've written 5 legal thrillers in the Brent Marks series and 2 in the Seth Rogen Involuntary Spy Espionage series. Also, 3 in the nonfiction series, 2 on bees and 1 on saving the monarch butterfly. None of these novels are pure fiction. Instead, they are meant to inform and perhaps even stimulate the public on matters of needing social and political reform. Was there any one catalyst that spurred you on to this direction?
Yeah, there was. It's a little insect called the bee. Kind of strange that a bee got me involved in my second career of writing. But how it happened was my wife and I were celebrating our 2nd anniversary wedding in San Francisco a few years ago. And we were sitting in the hotel dining room at breakfast and saw a notice that the hotel was keeping bees on the roof in hives because of the bee crisis. And at that time, I thought the bee crisis was over. I thought it had been solved. But then I started to poke into it and discover that it only gotten worse. And my wife got inspired because she's a photographer, and she wanted to do an environmental photographic exhibition to make people aware of the problems facing the bees. Her idea was, if we could show them the bee up close and personal, and not something that just buzzes around and people run away and think it's going to sting them, then people might care more about them. So I was inspired by this to do more research into the plight of the bees, and that's what resulted in my first book, which is called Bless the Bees, and its children's counterpart, which is ABC, who are our pollinators and why are they in trouble? And that one I'm particularly proud of because it's been used as second-grade curriculum material in Baltimore public schools. So after these two nonfiction books, I started to go into fiction, and I wrote my first novel surrounding the issue of genetically engineered foods. It's called An Involuntary Spy, and he's got me going on that as well.
You know, my wife was saying that a while ago, when the bee crisis became somewhat in the news, she was in McDonald's or something, and she saw these little bees like struggling, and like they could hardly climb up the window, and they were like obviously dying. And I thought that the whole thing had disappeared too. And why is that? Why would we both sort of have an impression that it was solved?
I think it's just that the media didn't alert us to the fact that it was still going on, because no one really made a fuss about it, and that's why we really wanted to make a big point about it so everybody would know. Because bees are more important than just honey. They pollinate most of our fruits and vegetables, and without them we wouldn't have a balanced diet, basically, and that's the selfish part. I mean, they contribute an essential part to every ecosystem on Earth, basically, except the ones in the sea.
Wow. Well, do you think that, the only person I've actually ever heard speak of this in the last few years was Linda Moulton Howe. Mm-hmm. And what will it take? Doesn't it require much more than just sort of sitting back and knowing about it? How can something be done? Why is the media so silent about this?
And they can be done on the individual level. First of all, the basic problem that's facing the bees is the one that's facing us as well, and that's the fact that since the World War II, our food production has been basically produced by chemicals. We went from family farming, we went from conscious, responsible farming to chemical farming. Instead of putting regular fertilizer on the ground, organic fertilizer to replenish the nutrients in the soil, we're using chemicals, nitrogen fertilizer. We're killing off the entire, all the weeds and all the things that we classify as pests or bugs with pesticides. And the fact of the matter is, we need bugs. We need bugs, and we need weeds too. It's part of the ecosystem that we really can't do without. So this is where we went wrong, and this is where a lot of people are making profits, and we're being the guinea pigs and not getting the quality of food anymore.
Wow, that's really amazing.
It is.
I'm gonna quote from the beginning of your book, Bless the Bees, which reiterates some of the points you made before the break. The bees have survived over 100 million years of evolution, but it's taken us less than 30 days to endanger them to the point of extinction. Bees are responsible for pollinating 60% of the world's food supply and 90% of all flowering plants. Without them, the human race would face starvation. One of every 3 bites of food comes from plants pollinated by honeybees and other pollinators. Without bees to pollinate our food, we would have had a worldwide food and economic epidemic. It has been called the bee apocalypse by Russia's president, but it is worse in the United States than any other country. Could you describe the dimensions of this bee apocalypse?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty scary. If you remember, I don't know if you know the quote from Albert Einstein, but he's attributed the bee to having said, if the bee disappears from the earth, man would have no more than 4 years to live. And what he meant by that was the bees are an indicator species. In fact, scientists think now that the bees are warning us of an upcoming mass extinction. That means when a large amount of species are basically wiped off the earth, when almost everything's wiped off the earth that's alive, basically, and something else takes over. To put that in the perspective, the last mass extinction we had on the Earth was 65 million years ago when the dinosaurs died. And this mass extinction is being caused by us, by mankind. And so the bees are warning us that, you know, if we see them weakening, they're the first weak link, and they're warning us that we've got to do something if we want the world to stay the way it is as we know it. Otherwise, it's going to change, and we may not be in it anymore.
Wow. That's pretty serious. You know, we're going to play a song now. It's called Look What You Have Done. It was inspired by, it's by Stephanie Slavine and was inspired by a blues singer. These days, I think maybe we should sing it to some of our politicians looking at our country and people who are supposed to be loved and cared for. A very sad song, but also brilliant and touching.
Look what you have done to this little child of mine. Look what you have done, for your darkness has gone blind. You broke and starved her body, and I freed you from your sin. But look what you've done to this child of mine, 'cause you let the darkness in. You cannot be saved, for I gave you a lasting chance. But you chose the path to darkness, and you did the devil's dance. Oh, look what you have done to this little child of mine. Look what you have done, for your darkness has gone blind. Forever in her sorrow, her happiness a show. Little broken girl, nobody wants to know. And I did always love her since the age of birth. But she could not feel my love, for she felt she had no worth. Oh, look what you have done to this little child of mine. Look what you have done, for your darkness has gone blind. And you can see her torment as she cries out in the rain, and I can feel her pain as she always calls my name.
Boots in Manhattan is a coming-of-age novel by Ray Boylan and Johnny Bluestar. It is about a young Tom Boots Raymond who grows up in New York in the 1940s who is a member of a street gang.
My friends and I were about to start our own game of stickball when Rabbit Lacey, the head of the Rattlers, came up to us and tried to move in on our game. We were called Dwarves, the youngest members of this stupid gang.
Hey, Kevin, I need you to get some gloves and some stuff I left at my place.
No, this is our game.
Hey, are you my good little dwarf or what?
You've been calling me a dwarf since I was 6. We're not your personal slaves, pal.
Hey, what is this? A dwarf rebellion? All right, big guy, we ditched the dwarf thing. We make you guys regular rattlers.
No, it's too late.
He looked at Jay and me. We looked away. Rabbit was now angry, and he pushed Kevin hard with the palms of his hand. Kevin tried to ram him in the stomach, but he stepped aside, throwing Kevin into the curb where he fell to the ground, bleeding profusely at the knee. Still, he managed to get up.
My street.
Kevin shouted at Rabbit, pointing at him with an angry index finger.
Find out more by Googling Boots in Manhattan, a 1940s coming-of-age novel, part 1 of the novel series The Foot Soldier by Ray Boylan and Johnny Bluestar. Google with the words Boots in Manhattan, Ray Johnny Kindle. That's Boots in Manhattan, Ray Johnny Kindle.
Nowadays, if you are a serious business person, just getting assistance from someone with a license and a bit of experience may not be sufficient. In fact, your realtor actually needs to be knowledgeable enough to be one of your top advisors. Whether you're facilitating a giant merger or selling your company, there's a lot at stake besides your finances. There is the future value of your current investment, financial freedom, integrity, and overall reputation. If you need this kind of assistance, Sandra LaFlamme is a real estate expert with the experience, reputation, and knowledge qualified to assist you in all your key transactions. Sandra LaFlamme, real estate services with integrity and conscience. Contact her today at 888-366-8070. That's Sandra LaFlamme at 888-366-8070. Hi, Ken. You know, we're now about to examine a little bit about your book called A Patriots Act, which is about illegal detention and torture. It's hard to believe, given what I think we both believed when we were younger, that there could be a national debate about such an absolutely despicable practice.
Yeah, it's impossible to believe, really. I mean, especially growing up in the Vietnam era, where I saw all these protests against, what people thought was something that should not be prosecuted in their name, and I certainly don't want to be known as an American who supported the Guantanamo Bay detention center and what went on there.
There just seems so many questions about that place. I've read about it fairly often, and it's just hard to believe. Now, one of the parts of that unfortunate situation has been going on just not there, but all over the world, and that is torture. And sanctioned at one point, legally, supposedly, by the United States. Whether it's going on now or not, it may be a matter of discussion. But it's painful to me, particularly in the lifelong respect I had for my father's belief in civil liberties, that a country prized for at least the inherent fairness of many of its principles and laws could descend to the level of systematic torture, illegal detention, and prisoner abuse. Perhaps we could go into a bit of discussion about how this practice first descended onto our political and legal landscape. Could you give us a thumbnail history of our legal descent into justifying and promoting torture as an actual policy of the United States?
Yes, well, torture and cruel and humiliating and degrading treatment is prohibited by the Geneva Conventions of 1949 and protocols of the Geneva Conventions of 1977. So what had to be done is that we had to, Bush and his cronies had to get away from the fact that the Constitution of the United States prohibits certain treatment of people, whether they're accused of a crime, and that the Geneva Conventions prohibits abuse of people that are considered to be prisoners of war. So to get around this, they decided, well, we don't have to worry about the Constitution if we're doing this. Constitution. And then they had the problem, well, how do we get around the Geneva Convention? So they actually called their legal team at the Justice Department in to work on this, to try to argue that somehow we could go out and capture and kill people who we suspected to be terrorists as part of the war on terror, because there was some kind of a emergency exception to all these laws that had been basically made after the atrocities of World War II. So what began was a series of memos by the Justice Department and the people that Bush appointed to the Justice Department that said that, oh, this is okay. For example, in 2001, 6 days after September 11th, Bush signed a secret finding empowering the CIA to capture, kill, or interrogate al-Qaeda leaders. And he also established a secret global network of facilities to detain and interrogate them. That's what we call the Black Ops centers. There was actually one in Guantanamo where they used certain enhanced interrogation techniques, which we know now because of the congressional report that they were torture. They exported some of these techniques to Abu Ghraib, so that's where they started, in Guantanamo, believe it or not.
It's interesting to me that some of these enhanced interrogation techniques were used by the North Vietnamese, by the communists, to get our prisoners of war to confess to crimes they didn't actually commit. So there is a little bit, this kind of brainwashing doesn't necessarily lead to correct information. I'm not saying that correct information is the only reason not to torture or not to torture, but why would they use techniques that they knew historically had led people to make false confessions and say things that weren't true? It's an interesting idea, huh?
It is interesting, but I can answer that. And the reason why they did that was they thought that these people would never make it to a U.S. court. There would never be a real court that would decide their case. They would never be able to defend themselves, and they would never have due process. So they thought they could use these coerced confessions against them in order to convict them and execute them. And, thankfully, thank God, the Supreme Court disagreed with them. But, not to the extent that Guantanamo was wiped out completely, because there's still 114 people there.
Yeah. It's pretty strange.
It's bizarre.
The idea of torture is, of course, you're torturing somebody who has not been convicted of a crime.
The Justice Department, like Attorney General Patrick Philbin and John Yoo, and also Jay Bybee, who's right now a federal Ninth Circuit Court justice, saying that federal courts have no jurisdiction over these cases. They can't review any cases, and international laws don't apply because it's the war on terror. And this led the these memos saying that all this stuff was okay led the groundwork for the abuses in all the U.S. military prisons all over the world.
Yeah, I believe that the Constitution was promising, equal justice for all, and all men, that, like the famous statement of Jefferson, all men are created equal. Now, if all men are created equal, then you would think that people in America would want everybody who got pulled into their little situation, even because of crimes, would still be entitled to the same basic concept of justice as everyone else, because they're human beings, and they are men or women. But
the thing is, Johnny, that they objectify these people. They accuse them of being a terrorist, and as a matter of fact, most of these guys who were accused of being terrorists and who were being held in Guantanamo were actually sold to the U.S. authorities by bounty hunters for like $500, $1,000. So they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But since there's such a fervor over September 11th, and I remember when it happened. I remember I cried. I really cried. I felt, I was proud when I heard Bush say he was going to go into Afghanistan, he was going to find the terrorists. I said, yeah, go get those terrorists. But that's the mentality behind it. That's how people think. They don't think this person has been accused of something. They think right away, this is a terrorist. When the Constitution of the United States says that you're presumed innocent until you're proven guilty, and you have the right to due process, right?
Yeah, of course. Or it used to be, of course.
Yeah, it used to be, of course, but now I guess you're not. And the first thing the Bush administration tried to do was abolish habeas corpus, which was actually the first guarantee of a right we had in the Constitution that's not in the Bill of Rights. It's right in the Constitution. And that gives us a right to go before a judge and say, hey, look, I've been wrongly accused, I'm being held in prison, and I should be let out. And finally, after several years, the Supreme Court said, look, these guys are entitled to habeas corpus. You guys were wrong. So a lot of them have been granted habeas corpus, but they're still sitting in prison because there's nowhere for them to go because none of their original countries that they come from wants them back. So they're in a legal limbo. And the only way they're going to get out, most of them, or a lot of them, is in a coffin.
Wow, that's really terrible.
It's unbelievable.
I believe when we discussed this, we've discussed that how Attorney General Alberto Gonzales issued a memo to George W. Bush. They called the Geneva Conventions quaint and obsolete.
Yeah.
Quaint and obsolete.
And they can ignore them when they want to interrogate prisoners. In other words, it's basically authorizing torture.
Yeah.
And like you said, the techniques of waterboarding, and on Friday the Guardian exposed another technique that they used, which was in the report actually, which was they would surround the person in cold water. It was another technique to simulate drowning, and it was called water dousing, basically another form of waterboarding.
Well, I'll tell you what. There's a lot more to talk about, and particularly to talk about the application of this in your work. But right now we need to take a break, and we're going to start out with a little promo from my friend Edgar Ahrens, who is a Russian composer living in Moscow.
Okay.
I've worked with Russian composer Edgar Ahrens for quite a few years, building an inventory of songs, many of which feature singer-performer Patricia Welch. We will soon be releasing these songs, components of an album and a musical in progress called Hadley's Castle. When Edgar and I first got together, I was amazed by the brilliance of his musical scores created for movies, TVs, and animations. Here is a sample of the work he did on the Russian TV series, available now on Amazon, called The Secret Agent's Memoir, which had 2 seasons. This score is called Escape and was created for the first season. I am very pleased to say that Bridge of Light Productions, a division of New Galaxy Enterprises, is proud to be the contact point for television and film companies seeking information about this amazing composer's work. If you're in the entertainment business and wish to know more, contact me at johnnybluestar@gmail.com. That's johnnybluestar@gmail.com.
It is the 15th century. El Tesoro de Cielo, a Spanish treasure ship, sends a scouting expedition to a strange island. Golden statues surrounding them prove the enormity of their find. Suddenly, hordes of ghoulish creatures with scaly green flesh and skeletal wings descend upon them from the sky.
What do you think of this, Rufio?
These creatures are fragile, Captain. We can take them with our swords.
They seem supernatural. Who knows what powers they possess?
Fallen angels, weakened by their treason.
My God, are you saying they're Nephilim, the devil's host?
I'm saying, whatever they are, we can take them. Do any of you cowards dare join me?
Up against sharp knife-like nails and hideous fangs, the men's swords rip into slimy green flesh. Though black blood pours copiously from their half-naked bodies, creatures miraculously persist. Can the crew survive this bloody, cursed battle?
Find out more by Googling The Thrice Born, a new sci-fi supernatural novel by Carlos Lopez Avery and Johnny Bluestar. Google with the words Carlos Johnny Kindle, The Thrice Born. That's Carlos Johnny Kindle, The Thrice Born.
New Galaxy Enterprises is a media company specializing in wide-ranging content like novels, nonfiction books, screenplays, commercial advertising, web content, etc. One of our most esteemed providers is illustrator Robert W. Zalo. I work on all my most important projects like book covers, logos, web design elements with Robert. As an illustrator, he worked on the Ignatz-nominated comic book, The Expert's Guide to Killing Things That Go Bump in the Night. His skills encompass advertising, magazine illustrations, gaming, comic books, TV production, and scenic painting. His clients include Comcast, Adelphia, Haven Talent, ForceWorks, High Octane Theater, Star Creative Advertising. If you wish to contact Robert, go to JohnnyBlueStar.com and let me know. That's JohnnyBlueStar.com. For artist, illustrator Robert Zalo, an essential component of all the work we do. Maybe he can help you too. I think that Abu Ghraib was the dramatic eye-opener for me. And yet I never realized that such brutality could be officially sanctioned. Yet at one point, torture, like we were saying, became a key component in political and judicial type of official governmental activities, but it also became an important component in television, movies, and unfortunately this trend has not stopped. It makes the days of Dirty Harry look particularly tame. You remember Dirty Harry?
Oh, yeah.
Well, because of I was brought up that way, by an actual ethical lawyer, it really was disgusting to me.
Yeah.
You know, we're both writers who have entered the publishing game with the objective of social reform. Matter of fact, the book Boots in Manhattan that was promoted before was a book I wrote, part of a series called The Foot Soldier, that kind of contrasts, in part, the experience of a person who's on the ground in war and the mentality of the policy makers, sometimes rabidly divergent. Really strange. Anyway, we're now competing with predatory emulators of government and social wrongdoing in media. I think maybe the first salvo of this predatory interest in the series in torture was the series 24. Homeland continued this media obsession as did many other films and TV programs. Perhaps as disturbing a movie has ever been made, for me, anyway, was Zero Dark 30 during, I believe, the Obama administration, when they supposedly alleged the type of enhanced interrogation used to find bin Laden. People can say what they want, and the film appeared on many top 10 lists of U.S. film critics, but the film was another strong descent into evangelizing the value of terrible and brutal infringement of human rights. Do you look at your work, Ken, as some kind of antidote to this aberration of media?
Well, at this point, I'm not sure if it's an antidote to this type of media, because the people in my audience who read my books are not necessarily going to be the same ones who are going to go to see these shows or films. I don't like these type of films myself. Like you said, people can do whatever they want in their art, but it bothers me that we go down to this simple us or them mentality, and as the American tribe, we're ready to wave the flag and send our basically our kids and grandkids into wars that we don't know anything about. And you infuse patriotism with killing people, and somehow that makes it a heroic thing. Somehow it's okay for a drone to go and assassinate somebody miles and miles away because we don't have to actually see it, and we don't see it. And I've always been bothered that patriotism's always been used by governments to get the public behind a war and things like that. My novels are written in sort of faction, which is fiction that entertains you but teaches you a fact about something. And they have a lot of realism, and they're dialogue-driven, which would make them excellent candidates for films or programs. So if they get into this medium, which I hope they will, perhaps they can be an antidote.
Would you tell us a little bit more about the details of your story, Patriot Act, without maybe giving away all the plot details?
Yeah, well, without spoiling it, without spoiling the story, because I can't do that. But we're basically following the story of a naturalized U.S. citizen who has a normal life and family in Santa Barbara, but he just happens to have been born in Iraq. So when he receives a call from his brother who still lives in Iraq saying, "I need your help," of course he drops everything and he goes to help him. But like I said before, when these guys were in the wrong place at the wrong time, he gets captured in a raid by bounty hunters and sold to the United States as a suspected terrorist just because he's in the same room with his brother who's being suspected as a terrorist himself. So there he's classified as an enemy combatant and thrown into Guantanamo Bay detention camp with basically they threw away the key and locked the door. And the protagonist of the story is the attorney, Brent Marks, who assists Ahmed to try to get him out of Guantanamo. And there's a few twists to the story that you gotta get it to read it. It's not an easy read, but it's something that everybody should read, especially since we are living in these times where the government can actually do something like this. And like you said before, you can't believe it. Well, you may not be able to believe it, but the government did do it.
Is the government still doing it? Is what that movie Dark 030, did that actually happen, do you think? Or is that the government denied it, but the people said, but they also said that these people had unauthorized access to classified material to make it?
I can't say whether it's true or not because I don't have the research, but these things do get exposed to WikiLeaks, and then the government is put in an embarrassing position where they say, "Oh yeah, we did torture some folks," or something like that. Remember when Obama said that? I mean, they can't hide what they did because people are going to talk. For example, there's a guy that I met after I put my book out, after I published a Patriots Act. Guard in Guantanamo to publish a nonfiction book called Murder at Camp Delta, which is basically about 3 detainees who the government says hung themselves in their cells. But it turns out that they couldn't have hung themselves because they were dead before they were hanging. So he actually witnessed them being taken from Camp Delta to an off-site CIA Black Ops facility, and then he witnessed when the van brought them back. And when they brought them back, they were not alive. So, this kind of stuff comes out because people see it, and they're not going to just sit, hopefully they're not just going to sit by and let stuff like this happen.
Wow, it's really a terrible situation. Do you remember the Tonkin Bay incident?
Yes, I have, yeah.
Because there's another example of incredible deception, which took us to war, where you presume that you tell the world that there was an attack on one of your ships, and it leads to bombing North Vietnam, but the attack really did not exist, except in the people who engineered this sort of facade.
I think they assume that the American public is just not intelligent enough to figure things out for themselves, which I think is a poor assumption on their part to be made, because they get caught in these situations where people will come up with and expose the actual facts, and but sometimes at great expense to themselves. I'm speaking of Edward Snowden, for example, who said, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore, and I don't care what happens to me. It takes individuals like this to tell us, hey guys, you got blinders on, open your eyes.
To just change the subject for a second, you heard in the last break a song by Stephanie Sylvain, and I have to tell you that this is a UK person, a singer-songwriter that I met on LinkedIn. And it's like amazing how many wonderful people you can meet, like I did with Edgar Ahrens, who's a Russian composer I work with. Now, she wrote a song called I Love You the Most, which I played the other day. I know that you love me the most. But this song, it actually, since our last broadcast last week, it's become a hit all over the world.
Wow.
In Australia, in Africa, in different places in Africa, in Detroit, in Los Angeles, in France. And I'd like to play this. It's really interesting approach to when you have somebody that you basically is abusing you, and you still want them to love you, and you believe. Here it goes.
I may have marmalade on my toast, and you may have your caviar. I may walk to work in my second-hand shoes, and you drive in your fancy car. I'm down here and you're up there. You're giving me the looks like you don't care. But they say love and hate are so very close, so I know that you love me the most. I know by the way you stare at me that deep down inside you care for me. You may drink champagne to my cup of tea, but nobody freaking cares. And you say I ain't the one for you, that I'm way down there beneath the view. But look at what your poor shake's done to you, and nobody freaking cares. She took your money and laughed at you, and then slept with all your mates and they were laughing too. So let's kick her to the curb, yeah, me and you, for nobody freaking cares. And I know you said bad things of me, but deep down inside you care for me. For they say love and hate are so very close, so I know that you love me the most. You took to your drink and your one-night stand, so please don't judge me by your own bad hand. Yeah, stand up straight, just be the man, for nobody freaking cares. And come down off your mighty horse and take a chance on me, and we'll run the course, and we'll show the bitch we don't do divorce, for nobody freaking cares. And I know you said bad things of me, but deep down inside you care for me. For they say love and hate are so very close, so I know that you love me the most. Yes, I know that you love me the most.
The following is from West Side Warrior, the memoir of Ray Boylan, a Korean War veteran and crime fighter. He was there fighting in the world's coldest battlefield when the Chinese communists invaded.
Desperate squad members ran past our foxhole yelling, "Get the hell out of here, there's too many of them." Again, we saw the Chinese soldiers charging in with opium-induced mindlessness, oblivious of our bullets. Again, we heard the bugles and whistles. Climbing out of our foxhole, Bob dropped 2 hand grenades behind us, and I threw one over my shoulder. Bullets whizzing by our heads, Bob and I became bolts of lightning flashing across the mountainside. Like a hideous film, desperate scenes like this played out on the Tokong Pass for 3 days. Sometimes I played in the scene. Sometimes I could only watch and wonder if it were real, or if I'd be suddenly jolted out of my trance by an RKO usher saying, "Hey, did you kids sneak in here?"
To acquire this book, Google westsidewarrior.boylan.kindle. Boylan is spelled Boylan. That's Westside Warrior, Boylan, Kindle.
This is Johnny Bluestar. I've worked as a lyricist with Patricia Welch for over 5 years, along with Russian composer Edgar Ahrens, a friend and colleague. Her ability as a singer is simply amazing. She brings a unique and dramatic flair to every song she sings. Over the next few months, we shall be releasing a number of these songs, part of an album called Hadley's Castle. Meanwhile, Patricia has been busy creating a super enjoyable collection of classic standards in an exciting 46-song, 3-CD collection.
Music for great entertaining introduces Cocktails, Dinner, and Dessert with Patricia Welch. 3 hours of continuous music. 46 of the all-time classic standards, spanning decades of hit songs. friends home for dinner? Cocktails, dinner, and dessert with Patricia also makes the perfect hostess gift. This 3-CD compilation is the perfect background music that sets just the right mood for any dinner party.
I'm crazy for feeling so lonely. There was a boy, a very strange, enchanted boy.
To purchase this album, just go to patriciawelch.com/CD. That is patriciawelch.com/CD. You won't be disappointed. We're back with Kenneth Eade, author, attorney, and environmental activist. I would like to read something from an op-ed piece that was published in the New York Times on June 24th, 2012. After speaking about the drone attacks in foreign countries and the deaths included of innocent women and children, which you mentioned before, Ken, the writer said, meanwhile, the detention faculty at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, now houses 169 prisoners. About half have been cleared for release, yet little have prospect of ever attaining their freedom. American authorities have revealed that in order to obtain confessions, some of the few being tried only in military courts have been tortured by waterboarding more than 100 times or intimidated with semi-automatic weapons, power drills, or threats to sexually assault their mothers. Astoundingly, these facts cannot be used as a defense by the accused because the government claims they occurred under the cover of, quote, national security. Most of the other prisoners have no prospect of even being charged or tried either. At a time when popular revolutions are sweeping the globe, the United States should be strengthening, not weakening, basic rules of law and principles of justice enumerated in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But instead of making the world safer, America's violation of international human rights abets our enemies and alienates our friends. Now, this isn't exactly Daniel Ellsberg or some incredible astute whistleblower like Snowden. The writer is Jimmy Carter, the 39th president of the United States. Could anything be put clearer than that letter by a former president? Ken, what do you think is happening in our country?
Well, I agree with what President Carter said to Oprah Winfrey in the interview, which is that democracy is dead and that the U.S. is now being run by an oligarchy. President Carter's pointed out that our country is being run by a small group of rich, elite people who use the government for their own aims. And part of the way they use the government is with the military-industrial complex. Basically, they can go send this war machine out to fight private battles. When we see this in foreign policy where the United States uses military aid to arm insurgent groups and overthrow governments, like just happened in the Ukraine, where it installed its own people in the Ukrainian government. I'm speaking of Natalie Jaresko, who was a top State Department official, and now she's the Minister of Finance in the Ukraine. And Hunter Biden, Vice President Biden's son, is sitting on one of the boards of the biggest gas company in Ukraine, and we're seeing it happen in Syria, and we're seeing it happen in Iraq. And how do we justify that, and how do we justify their use of torture when it's banned by international law? I don't think it can be justified. I think we have to stand up and say enough is enough, and this has to stop. I've spent a lot of time living outside the United States myself, and I can tell you that when the Iraq War was happening, people would come up to me and say, "Well, are you for or against this?" And I would say, "Look, I'm against it because it's not being prosecuted in my name." But back home, people were flying flags, and they were just blind to the fact of what was going on. I think that Europeans have always had great respect for people from the States and the American dream and the constitutional principles, but now, unfortunately, the U.S. is not practicing their own ideals, and it's breaking my heart.
Yes, it's like really the wrong message to send to the rest of the world. And there's an old Greek saying, the word is the shadow of the deed. And the fact that we can continually proclaim freedom, liberty, and democracy and practice these certain things throws a great shadow on our flag. And it's very, very sad.
And
of course,
if we're running into a place and we're saying, you know, in the name of democracy, we're doing this, and we're torturing and killing people, what are we doing in the name of democracy, you know?
And the amount of innocent people who die as a result of some of these practices is probably, you know, since the Iraq War, certainly the hundreds of thousands of people who died for just being in the wrong place, just like those prisoners in Guantanamo are picked up for the wrong reasons, and they're in the wrong place, and who cares? Well, we should care.
Exactly, and now in Syria, we've created a refugee problem where we send hundreds of thousands of people who have no homes to Europe, who can't even afford to take them in. And
yeah, it is very, very sad. And right now, we do need to take a station break, but we will come back with this important discussion of the rights of human beings and their right not to be tortured and abused.
Views and opinions expressed on this program were those of the hosts and guests and did not necessarily reflect those of Vegas All Net Radio, its affiliates, or its parent company.
Is your current homeowner's insurance adequate for your needs? I'm Cheston Williams of the J. Cheston Williams Agency. When you get homeowner's insurance from American Family, you also get me, an agent who can help you make sure your coverage is up to date with all the home improvements and valuable possessions you add throughout the years. Interested? Call me, Cheston Williams, at the J. Cheston Williams Agency today at 702-854-4768 or stop by 6348 South Rainbow Suite 100 today.
American Family Insurance and Mutual Insurance Company, 6000 American Parkway, Madison, Wisconsin, 53783.
American Family Insurance.
This is Vegas All Net Radio, the final frontier of free speech.
Views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect those of Vegas All Net Radio, its affiliates, or its parent company.
This is Johnny Blue Star. Welcome to Threshold, a global media event. Is the universe just a random dance of atoms, or is it a manifestation of a supremely intelligent architect? Can its purpose, or our purpose here on Earth, be adequately assessed? Can we commune with it, know its intentions, cooperate with its direction? Here, we define threshold as a gateway state of awareness, allowing mankind to cross into a place of real cognition. Threshold allows us to approach questions of higher reality through the door of experience, rather than mere belief. Welcome to Threshold, where we tear away the veil from commercial media, bringing our audience and participants into another realm of reality and enhanced communication. To me, having developed this program called Threshold, I believe, personally now, despite the fact that the problems we face are so overwhelming, I don't believe that anything is impossible to God if enough of us are aligned with His presence and His design. But what I call alignment, on the one hand, a fairly simple idea, is not a simple practice, because most of us, like myself, of course, are fallen from that state of spiritual awareness I call the divine presence, most of the time or all of the time. I do believe, though, that God has reached out, and there are people who have acted in the sense of being aligned with His purposes, and among those are the founding fathers of our country. I believe that the original teachings and writings and manifestations of our founding fathers are very much in tune with God's plan for this world. And so, therefore, I endorse patriotism, patriotic songs, our soldiers who go and risk their lives for their country, and the very principles of our country. And when we played the Star Spangled Banner a few shows ago, I felt the same stirring I always did. I went to the same school that Francis Scott Key went to, St. John's College in Annapolis, the third oldest college in this country. And I sat and read stuff and did stuff under the Liberty Tree where he supposedly had sat so many years ago. And I feel stirred by patriotic feelings. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But how can you be stirred when what you see is the opposite of what I would consider a patriotism aligned with the vision of our founding fathers? What do you think, Ken?
I agree with you 100%, and that's why I called the book A Patriot's Act, because actually the act of Ahmed, the main character in the story, he's the one who's held in Guantanamo detention camp, but he's actually a U.S. patriot. He loves the United States. He believes in the American dream. He was living the American dream, and that's why I called it A Patriot's Act. So I hope that some of your listeners will go out there and buy it so they can read about what was actually done in their name.
It's a very interesting read, and I think the fact that it's told as a story will grip some of your readers even more than they would by reading sort of cold, dried material.
Right.
But I think it's very important that people, well, patriotism itself, it's something that involves our emotions. It's not just our minds. And we need to be able to preserve some of these more sacred and important feelings, which are now being crushed by the abuse that our country is wreaking on its own citizens in the world. Speaking of
I agree, and we have to also watch out for abuses of the use of patriotism, because the government will often try to appeal to our emotions that you were talking about in order to make us do things that we wouldn't otherwise normally do. And it's nothing new. When Hitler wanted to do his thing in Nazi Germany, he used patriotism to get everyone to play along with putting people in death camps and objectifying black people and Russians as communists and saying that they could just be basically wiped off of the face of the earth like a bug. And this is nothing that we believe in this country or in our Constitution or that the Founding Fathers said. So I think we have to remember what happened, with Nazi Germany and compare it to what the government's doing now and say, no, not in our name.
Yeah, I think that you got it when you said you're talking about the way you look at people as you objectify them, you make them into objects. They become non-human beings. I know because my family, a lot of them died in Polish concentration camps. Some of them fought in the Warsaw Ghetto, I'm told. Some of them escaped from Russia to come here for freedom, and also from Romania. So I come from a family that has experienced a lot of persecution. I grew up in Long Island, but I had these thoughts of what had happened to my family just a few decades ago. It's horrendous that the land of liberty and freedom should become this black site, and people not knowing what's going to happen next. I think that the term false flag is very interesting, because you talk about a false flag when you emulate something against your own citizens, and a false flag is what this patriotism, this pseudo-patriotism is about.
And it's interesting that this objectification and has actually come to U.S. soil and is manifesting itself in this is what the Black Lives Matter movement is trying to point out, and this is what my book Unreasonable Force is all written around, is police brutality. We have a police force now that's been militarized. Basically, we have boots on the ground in our backyard, and they're objectifying their targets. And one of the targets they objectify is anyone they see who's black. And that's just not right. Just because a person's black doesn't mean they're going to shoot you, you know. And this is why there's such an outcry, and that's why I was compelled to write that book.
Yes, I think that's sort of another kind of psychological shadow over America, the militarization of the police force. And here's another really another shadow, which I don't think is too subtle, but it's a little bit subtle, which is this way we're searched when we go to an airport.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I know the story of Jessica Ventura,
like
actually left the country because
and when I come back, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I feel like a criminal when I go through security, and then when I come back, you know, from an overseas trip, when I go back to the United States, everybody on the plane feels like a criminal, basically. And, you know, they're coming to, most of the people are coming here to have a vacation, to have fun. You know, they've saved their money all year long, and they're going to go to America, or they're going to go to Las Vegas or New York. They're looking forward to it. And when they hit the ground, they're being treated like a bunch of criminals. You know, welcome, guys, right?
Yeah, it's sort of it is a kind of mind control technique. What you do is you slowly and carefully make people afraid of doing a lot of very ordinary things, and then after a while, they're so afraid they don't say anything, and when they don't say anything, that kind of creeps into other areas of their life. So they become politically
not only do they not say anything, they close their eyes to what's happening around them, which is the worst part.
And you know, the fact is that a lot of the people who were probably involved in these atrocities as civilians in Nazi Germany, you know, kind of going along with seeing their neighbors having all their property stolen from them and being thrown onto trains that led them to death camps. That was a slow, even though it happened rather fast, it was also kind of a slow process. But you can, in other words, it was step by step, lie after lie, fear after fear, and suddenly these people are basically moral automatons.
And and it's all done by objectifying the victim. In other words, it's not easy, but what they do is they put a human being that you're concerned with. It's okay to put this person out of their house and into a death camp because they're not a human being. They're some kind of a bug. They're lower than us because we're the best. It's us against them. And this us against them mentality is very, very damaging. Yeah.
Well, I want to turn for a while to return to the bees. We're talking about colony collapse disorder. And I'd like to just go into this a little bit more. Why don't you kind of explain what it is?
Sure. Colony collapse disorder is a term that was formulated in about 2006, and it's used to describe a phenomenon where the beekeeper would come and pull the top off his hive, you know, to check the bees and find out that all the adult honeybees that were supposed to be working in the hive have all disappeared, and they've left the queen and all the babies alone, basically to die. And the statistics are that up to a frightening 40% of hives are lost this way each year, and it's been classified as colony collapse disorder, but it's really not. It's really not a disorder or disease per se, as just to describe the problem.
Do you recall when this first started, when this first came to the attention of people in America?
It was around 2006, and they didn't really know what the cause of it was, but a bunch of think tanks started studies to try to figure out what was happening, because obviously the bees are very important. They, like you read from my book before, they pollinate all flowering plants. Basically, if we didn't have the bees, we would have we would be malnutritioned, and that's just the selfish part of it. You know, not counting what they provide for all the other animals on Earth.
Well, what happens, go into a little more detail about what happens when pollination stops or is reduced to almost nothing. What happens to the plants?
Well, plants can't propagate themselves without, plants are immobile, so they can't have sex, basically. And evolution has developed a system where the plants and insects have a symbiotic relationship. The insects are attracted to the plants by their nectar, and when they come to suck the nectar, the pollen attaches to their legs and bodies, and then they move to the next flower and deposit the pollen, and in that way, the plant is pollinated and the insect is fed. So this is how butterflies and bees and bats pollinate most plants on Earth. That's why it's so important. If we lose the bees, if we lose the bats, and we lose the butterflies, we lose the plants. And by the way, they make oxygen, they prevent floods. They're pretty important to have.
Yes. It's sort of like surrogate reproductive organs or mobile ones, right?
Basically. I mean, these ecosystems have evolved over millions of years. And, the insects are important to pollinate the plants. And then when the plants are pollinated and they produce the seeds, they surround their seeds with fruits. And the animals come and they eat the fruit and throw away the seed wherever they finished eating the fruit. And in that way, the distribution system. So there's kind of what you're saying about spiritualism and God, there's kind of like a divine plan for this whole thing. And when we come in and we start to monkey around with that and try to change the course of things by killing all the bugs, for example, because we want to grow more crops, we're actually screwing up these ecosystems, and to the point where we're doing damage that's permanent. And it's going to change the way we know the way the life we know it on Earth is for us right now if we don't stop.
I think it's really important. Right now, we're going to take a break, and first we're going to listen to a song called "Gifted" by, again, this amazingly talented singer-songwriter Stephanie Sleeven, and this is actually about singer Robert Johnson.
It is the 15th century. El Tesoro.
They say you're gifted. You must have got your gifts from the devil. Your lyrics uplifted. Because they're on a new level. Look to the left, look to the right. There's a devil on my shoulder, or is he hiding from sight? Have made a pact with the devil. Your lyrics uplifted. Could I not have got them from heaven? What's wrong with you? Can't you see? My gifts are from God, for He believes in me. gifts are from God, and my name is Robert Johnson.
El Tesoro de Cielo, a Spanish treasure ship, sends a scouting expedition to a strange island. Golden statues surrounding them prove the enormity of their find. Suddenly, hordes of ghoulish creatures with scaly green flesh and skeletal wings descend upon them from the sky.
What do you think of this, Rufio?
These creatures are fragile, Captain. We can take them with our swords.
They seem supernatural. Who knows what powers they possess?
Fallen angels, weakened by their treason.
My God! Are you saying they're Nephilim, the devil's host?
I'm saying, whatever they are, we can take them. Do any of you cowards dare join me?
Up against sharp knife-like nails and hideous fangs, the men's swords rip into slimy green flesh. Though black blood pours copiously from their half-naked bodies, the creatures miraculously persist. Can the crew survive this bloody, cursed battle?
Find out more by Googling The Thrice Born, a new sci-fi supernatural novel by Carlos Lopez Avery and Johnny Bluestar. Google with the words Carlos Johnny Kendall, The Thrice Born. That's Carlos Johnny Kendall, The Thrice Born.
This is Johnny Bluestar. I've worked as a lyricist with Patricia Welch for over 5 years, along with Russian composer Edgar Ahrens, a friend and colleague. Her ability as a singer is simply amazing. She brings a unique and dramatic flair to every song she sings. Over the next few months, we shall be releasing a number of these songs, part of an album called Hadley's Castle. Meanwhile, Patricia has been busy creating a super enjoyable collection of classic standards in an exciting 46-song, 3-CD collection.
Music for great entertaining introduces Cocktails, Dinner, and Dessert with Patricia Welch. 3 hours of continuous music. 46 of the all-time classic standards, spanning decades of hit songs. Going to a friend's home for dinner? Cocktails, Dinner, and Dessert with Patricia also makes the perfect hostess gift. This 3-CD compilation is the perfect background music that sets just the right mood for any dinner party.
I'm crazy for feeling so lonely. There was a boy, a very strange, enchanted boy.
To purchase this album, just go to patriciawelch.com/CD. That is patriciawelch.com/CD. You won't be disappointed. I'm with Mr. Johnny Bluestar with Ken Eade, who's written a lot of books. And right now we're focusing on particularly a book called Bless the Bees. And I'd like to quote from this, Ken, if it's okay.
Sure.
Since 1972, feral honeybees in the United States have declined 80% to near extinction, and domestic bees in the United States are down to 60%. Since 2006, the epidemic among honeybees has been referred to as we've spoken of before, Ken, colony collapse disorder, CCD, describing the disappearance of entire colonies of bees. Many native pollinators, such as native bees, bats, birds, wasps, and flies, also face extinction due to habitat destruction, climate change, lack of biodiversity, and the use of pesticides. Among the causes cited for this disaster of epidemic proportions are parasites, the decrease in abundance and diversity of wildflowers, insecticides, and genetically engineered foods, GMOs, that create their own synthetic pesticides, which kill bees as well as other insects, have been shown to be harmful to humans as well. I would like to focus for a second on GMOs and exactly how this biotechnology works inside of the bees, so to speak, and in the plants when they're engineered.
Okay. The GMOs were brought on by a big campaign by the chemical companies based on lies, basically. They said that they were going to increase yield and they were going to feed the world. But what they really have done is they have enabled them to extend their patent. I'll explain this in a second. Okay. But the research about GMOs led me to create my first novel, which is called An Involuntary Spy. Some people have described that as Snowden meets GMO. It's about a biologist who works for a large biotech company who discovers that his company and the government are in collusion to hide the dangers of GMOs from their consumers, which is exactly what happened. About 20 years ago, the industry snuck all this stuff on your table because they basically controlled the USDA and the FDA. So I'm pretty proud that this book is being used as course material at Columbia University in environment and sustainability courses.
That's great.
So, yeah. So with GMOs, we have to understand the way that farming changed after World War II, which is something I mentioned before. Before World War II, we had basically farms that were used, that were fertilized with organic fertilizer. We didn't have widespread use of pesticides that we have now. But after World War II, farming became industrialized. Forest ecosystems were destroyed to provide large plots of farmland. Instead of rotating crops, factory farms planted the same crop, and chemical fertilizers were used as well as pesticides to kill pests and increase crop yield. As a result, our groundwater and our ground is being contaminated with these farm products, which means you, the consumer, are eating and drinking these poisons along with your food. What they did with GMOs, and their objective was to engineer crops that resist pesticides, which means that in their crops that are pesticide resistant, they can spray an entire farm with the pesticide and it kills everything except for the crop. But what happens is you're getting that pesticide in the food that you eat, because once it goes into the plant's tissues, it doesn't come out. The other type of GMO that they're engineering actually makes its own pesticide because it engineers a bacteria that's commonly found in the soil, but when it's done inside the plant, for example, corn and soybeans, it creates a super pesticide. And what it does is it explodes the insect's stomach. So the bees that are actually foraging on these flowers are getting a dose of this pesticide, and in doses that it's not enough to kill them, it's making them so they're disoriented and can't find their way back to the hive, and that's contributing to colony collapse disorder. So these two types of GMO food are the most prevalent now, and you're finding them in every processed food. So basically everything you eat in a box, bottle, or can has got it. You with me, Johnny?
Yeah. Could you go into the Monsanto patent situation a little bit more?
Sure. Monsanto had a patent on a herbicide that's called glyphosate, and it's used in their most popular product, which is Roundup. Roundup is the most common herbicide used in the world, and their patent was about ready to run because, as you know, patents don't last forever. So it was going to expire, which means that anybody can make glyphosate, and they're going to have this multi-billion-dollar market taken away by competitors. So they said, look, here's what we'll do. We'll make a crop that resists our glyphosate, and we'll own the patent on that crop. In other words, we're not just going to own the poison, we're going to own the seed itself. So if you want crops that don't die, you're going to buy them from us. And once a farmer buys these seeds, they have to only plant those seeds by contract with Monsanto, so they become slaves of Monsanto, basically. That's the reason behind the creation of Roundup Ready crops.
That is just so, I mean, that's so sinister. It almost really seems like bad science fiction, doesn't it? I mean, it's just ridiculous.
It does seem that way. I mean, and people often refer to these as frankenfoods because of the fact that they are not safe. When these foods were first being put through the FDA, there were scientists at the FDA had said, "Hey, we've got to have testing done on this stuff. This stuff we've got to check and see if it's safe or not." But thanks to Michael Taylor, who was a bigwig of the FDA, who originally came from Monsanto, and now he's the head of the FDA, policy formulated called generally recognized as safe. In other words, if this thing looks like an ear of corn, who cares if it's got poison inside of it? We're going to assume it's safe. So all of these foods got passed on the assumption that they were safe because they looked like they were safe without any testing. No GMO foods are tested in America. They don't have to test them at all.
What have they found in other countries
They take the word
in terms of research?
of the chemical company that it's safe, and that's it.
Wow. That is so sad.
It's unbelievable.
But isn't it like most of our problems, politically, scientifically, it's money. I mean, money is somehow is driving these incredible crimes against humanity and the planet.
It's money. And you know, the people with big money are the ones, like President Carter said, you know, basically, you've got to have at least $300 million now to be elected president. That wasn't true in his day. You can't run on a platform like Bernie Sanders, who wants to discuss the issues. You've got to have, you know, $500 million in your pocket. And this is big money. And when people put up big money for politicians, they expect to be paid back. They're buying it. They're not getting it. They're not doing this out of the goodness of their heart. They want a profit. And the profit is when the politicians, when the appointments come up at FDA and USDA and all the governmental agencies like the SEC, everyone that's supposed to be watching the industries, guess who they're appointing? The top people from the industries that are being watched. They're watching themselves. They're making their own rules.
It's really strange. It's like when the CIA director, Al Dulles, who was fired by Kennedy, became one of the most important components of the Warren Commission. You just wonder about these things. It's really strange. We're going to go to a break now with a little musical interlude by Edgar Ahrens, and then a few commercials, and we'll be right back.
The following is from West Side Warrior, the memoir of Ray Boylan, a Korean War veteran and crime fighter. He was there fighting in the world's coldest battlefield when the Chinese communists invaded.
Desperate squad members ran past our foxhole yelling, "Get the hell out of here, there's too many of them!" Again, we saw the Chinese soldiers charging in with opium-induced mindlessness, oblivious of our bullets. Again, we heard the bugles and whistles. Climbing out of our foxhole, Bob dropped 2 hand grenades behind us, and I threw one over my shoulder. Bullets whizzing by our heads, Bob and I became bolts of lightning flashing across the mountainside. Like a hideous film, desperate scenes like this played out on the Tokong Pass for 3 days. Sometimes I played in the scene. Sometimes I could only watch and wonder if it were real, or if I'd be suddenly jolted out of my trance by an RKO usher saying, "Hey, did you kids sneak in here?"
To acquire this book, Google westsidewarrior.boylan.kindle. Boylan is spelled Boylan. That's Westside Warrior, Boylan, Kindle.
Nowadays, if you are a serious business person, just getting assistance from someone with a license and a bit of experience may not be sufficient. In fact, your realtor actually needs to be knowledgeable enough to be one of your top advisors. Whether you are facilitating a giant merger or selling your company, there's a lot at stake besides your finances. There is the future value of your current investment, financial freedom, integrity, and overall reputation. If you need this kind of assistance, Sandra LaFlamme is a real estate expert with the experience, reputation, and knowledge qualified to assist you in all your key transactions. Sandra LaFlamme, real estate services with integrity and conscience. Contact her today at 888-366-8070. That's Sandra LaFlamme at 888-366-8070. You know, we've been talking about how agribusiness is kind of threatening our crops, the pollination of bees, and just really we're almost forced to, if we're really serious about what we eat, buying expensive organic produce and meat products. So this is kind of, I'm thinking about big business, the old thing about the banks, too big to fail. It's sort of more like big enough to make everyone else fail. I am not against prosperity. I'm not against wealth. But I am against wealth and prosperity when they just completely destroy the other people and the value of life itself. And I think that's what we're into right now, where this is the epoch where these type of businesses are blanketing the whole planet with this darkness.
Unfortunately, I agree with you on that 100%. I wish it wasn't so, but this is what we're confronted with now, and we do have to make a response to that.
If you go into just a grocery store, there is one thing that I love the grocery store that I go to sometimes to buy things, and I wanted just one salad dressing that doesn't really have any sugar in it, just a little, and yet almost all of them do, or they have high fructose syrup or some kinds of artificial sweetener, and which are things that are just they're not good for me. They may be good for some people, but they're not good for me, and I'd like to have a choice. But no, the choice sadly exists. If there was one salad dressing that didn't have sugar and they got rid of it, and I tried to get it back and I still have failed.
And it's not really sugar anymore, Johnny. It's hydrolyzed corn syrup, which is also GMO. And there's an act now that's called the DARK Act that the Congress is trying to pass to make it so states can't pass laws to require manufacturers to put labels if they're using genetically engineered food, so people won't know what they're eating. They don't know now.
That's just great, Ken.
They're trying to make it illegal.
Let's not have any more labels. I know that a lot of food, a certain number of additives, maybe sometimes dozens of additives, are there in trace amounts in food, and they haven't done necessarily any research on it, and they definitely don't tell you what's in it.
No. They don't, and basically, you can distrust anything that's in a box, bottle, or can, so look at it very carefully, but, beyond that, they're talking about sneaking the actual produce that's genetically engineered and selling it to you without knowing that you're buying genetically engineered corn or whatever. And I think that's a crime. I think people should have a right to know what they're eating because, some people are going to be sensitive to things. They're going to have allergies, and they want to know what they're putting in their bodies.
I want to point out another thing. This is a little bit of a digression, but to show the extent to which people have been they've been insensitized is just to look at I would say 9/10 of the pharmaceutical commercials where they're talking about these drugs and they're showing people playing on swings and eating barbecue and everything else, and they spend at least half the time talking about how the drug can disable you, can cause all kinds of terrible reactions, and even kill you. And people they're just buying these pharmaceuticals like crazy, and they're raising the prices as high as they possibly can. So I think that we are in a domain of mind control, and it's a subtle kind of mind control. It's a creeping kind of mind control, but we need to wake up. And I know that there are friends of mine I've seen who've actually suddenly woken up, and suddenly they start to look at what's going on around them, and it's a sad story. What can we do about this? Is there anything we can do about to save the bees?
You can get. Sorry. Go ahead, Johnny.
I said, is there anything we can really do about colony collapse disorder? Is there anything we can do to save the bees?
Yes, we can. In French, they have a saying that there are no problems, there's only solutions. So that's the way we have to look at it. And the solution lies with each one of us, individually. If we each do one little thing, and we all do one little thing, we can help save the bees and our environment at the same time. One of the things we can do is change our eating habits. Like you said before, organic foods are expensive, right?
Yeah.
But if more people buy them, they'll produce more organic foods and they'll become cheaper. If there's more demand for them, prices are gonna go down. So if you can possibly afford to buy organic food or local farm produce where you can actually ask the farmer what's in the food, you're going to have a healthier food. And you're also going to contribute to a more healthy environment for the bees. Now, let's say there's something even more simple that you can do. Plant a flower. If you have a garden, plant a flower that bees like. In my book, there's a whole page of things that they like, but they like stuff basically that smells. So verbena, flowering herbs that you can also use in your cooking, like thyme and rosemary, and a variety of wildflowers will make your garden or balcony beautiful, but it will also help the bees. My wife and I have taken up this cause to show people how important bees are to us, because we really need to care about them if we are to save them, because they can't speak for themselves. We have to speak for them. But even though they can't speak for themselves, they're trying to tell us that they're in trouble. And if they're in trouble, that means we're in trouble. So we need to talk to on their behalf to our children, our friends. We need to speak to our representatives in government and tell them that, hey guys, we're the ones who put you in office with our votes, not the PACs and super PACs that put hundreds of millions of dollars in your pocket. It's us. We're your bosses. Next time we go to the polls, we're going to be voting for someone who cares about our health and cares about our environment more than they care about your personal wealth plan.
You know, speaking of things you could do about the bees, I heard an interesting proposal on a film by Patty Greer, she's a great filmmaker. She specializes in studying crop circles, but she has a movie called "The Shift Has Hit the Fan." And one of the people in the show talks about how we can turn our lawns, the lawns that we have, you know, that we mow all this grass and we waste all this water, we can turn them into herb gardens. So we can create edible grass front lawns, edible front lawns. I thought that was an interesting solution, and it's an example of we have capacities and resources that we don't even look at to be able to solve problems.
Oh yeah, and that practice that you're talking about, making an herb garden instead of a front lawn, it's actually going to help the bees as well. Anybody can plant a flower, and by planting a flower, just even one, if we each plant one flower, we're going to save bees, and we're going to save ourselves in the process.
Well, you know, it's just. We ought to have some buttons. Anyone can plant a flower. Well, just tell us a little bit about the children's book you wrote about the bees.
The children's book is basically a Bless the Bees version for grade school. And it tells grade school kids with illustrations that my wife provided with photographs of the bees up close with her macro lens. It educates them on pollination, on bees, what the problems our pollinators are facing, and what even the children can do to help solve the problem. Like I said before, anyone can plant a flower. Well, a kid can plant a flower too. And I believe so strongly about this book, and I'm really happy that it's being used in Baltimore public schools in their second grade curriculum. But I feel so much about this message of the book that I created reading of it on YouTube that anybody can enjoy for free with their children. So if you go on YouTube and look for ABC, it's like ADEESEE. You can actually have a
That's good.
reading
ABC.
of the entire book.
Well, I want to see if we can play a song by Patty Greer, who I just mentioned, who wrote something called "I Want My Planet Back." I think that this song really embodies the sense that we all have, that we're talking about right now, that somehow all this wonderful nature, this wonderful Edenic planet that we have, has been kind of totally been overshadowed by this addiction to money and power. It's hard to understand that psychology, isn't it, Ken?
It's hard to understand because with all these wonderful things, for example, if we lost the bees, if you quantify it for profits, right? It's $173 billion a year loss. I mean, that's got to hurt someone's profits. They can't be the only ones on the planet that are trying to make money, right?
Yeah. It's just that somehow this green dollar is replacing this green planet.
I agree.
So we're going to take a commercial break. Russian composer Edgar Ahrens for quite a few years, building an inventory of songs, many of which feature singer-performer Patricia Welch. We will soon be releasing these songs, components of an album and a musical in progress called Hadley's Castle. When Edgar and I first got together, I was amazed by the brilliance of his musical scores created for movies, TVs, and animations. Here is a sample of the work he did on the Russian TV series, available now on Amazon, called The Secret Agent's Memoir, which had 2 seasons. This score is called Escape and was created for the first season. I am very pleased to say that Bridge of Light Productions, a division of New Galaxy Enterprises, is proud to be the contact point for television and film companies seeking information about this amazing composer's work. If you are in the entertainment business and wish to know more, contact me at johnnybluestar@gmail.com. That's johnnybluestar@gmail.com. If you want to hear and see some more of Patty Greer's work as a filmmaker and also some of her soundtracks, you can go to pattygreer.net, and also you can find some of her songs on YouTube. Wonderful songs, just like the one you just played. I Want My Planet
That song was great.
Ken, tell me something about your ultimate goals as a writer, and what kind of platform do you use to let the people know about your work? How can people buy your books and get in contact with you?
Well, the Patriots Act is actually traditional. You should be able to go to any bookstore and order it. Also, I think you can get it from Walmart and Costco. You can order it from them. But you can also get it from Amazon or Barnes & Noble. The rest of them are self-published, and they're available on Kindle and paperback from Amazon, and the audio versions of the books are available on Amazon and also iTunes. You can also go to my website, which is KennethEade.com, KennethEade.com, for information on any of my books. The whole point of my books is that people compare me to John Grisham because sometimes he'll like to wrap a story around an issue. I think, as we were talking before, that people learn when they're told stories. People learn that our brains are wired to learn from stories. And all of my stories are wrapped around an important social issue. So as long as we keep having important social issues, I'm going to keep writing it. And I hope people will keep reading so I can keep writing.
Yeah, I think it's great that anybody who has something to say can actually get it out there if they want to. And of course, it's much better, I think, in many ways sometimes, to use a traditional publisher. But you can go out there without doing that. I mean, I grew up and tried to be a writer at a time when a platform like that didn't exist at all. It's a wonder we can have conversations on Skype all over the world with people we care about in other countries who we may never even meet personally. We can do all kinds of wonderful projects in film and books and music all on the internet. So I think it's an important part of our freedom and an important way that we can get out this message that we have. People who hear our program, Threshold, they can go to YouTube. They're going to be able to find all of our programs sometimes a few days after we broadcast them, right there on YouTube, the whole program. And you'll be able to find this one, and you'll be able to, get a link and send it out to all your friends. If you think this program is important, and you think that Kenneth Eade is doing a really great job in describing some of the important issues we've talked about, torture or big colony collapse, tell your friends. Send out that link. I would like to thank a lot of people who have been involved in this. We have songwriters like Stephanie Sleven and Xavier Nathan and Bonnie Blazak, who we hear fairly often. We have Edgar Ahrens for his music, Patricia Welch, who has performed for us and had a whole program devoted to her amazing career. I really thank these people for coming, coming here to Threshold to provide their talents. I want to thank the owners of Vegas All-Net Radio who are making radio come alive again. They're calling it the last frontier of free speech. Well, I like that. I don't know if I like it that it's the last frontier, but it certainly is going in that direction. And we like to hear a voice of liberty in the wilderness of a media desert. And I want to particularly thank John Stiles, Ryan Rimmer for their help, and to our board op, Mike Fox, who always comes through for us. And finally, an homage to the great Hassan Khan, who has helped me with the websites, YouTube promotions, commercials, and many other elements supporting the show. And thank you, Ken Eade. Thank you for coming on board and telling us your story.
My pleasure, Johnny. Thanks for having me.
Just one more question before we go. You mentioned before you'd like to see these books become movies. So would I. I would like to see some of these things start to permeate the airwaves. And the airwaves, and go to a theater and watch your movies. So I want to say thank you so much, Ken. Thanks for coming here, and see you next week on Threshold Radio.
Views and opinions expressed on this program were those of the hosts and guests and did not necessarily reflect those of Vegas All Net Radio, its affiliates, or its parent company.